Let me share my favorite tips with you for crafting bakery-style quality scones in the comfort of your own home. These strawberry lemon scones are amazing and they are delicious. But let me share a couple tips with you. The first tip is that you want your scone batter to stay cold until it hits your hot oven. This is very important. Now there's a couple things that will ensure this. One is that I like to have all of my ingredients measured out, lined out, ready to go before I ever get started. The next thing is that your butter needs to stay cold. In this recipe, I'm going to show you how to do it without any special equipment, no food processors or anything like that. So we're going to use frozen butter to be able to do this. You want it to stay cold again until it hits that hot oven. So have everything ready and keep your butter cold. Now the next tip is that you want it to go into a hot oven, as I just mentioned. So be sure to preheat. I know this seems like a silly thing to say, but preheat your oven before you get started. That way the oven is ready when your scones are ready and they go right. This is so important because if your oven isn't hot, the scones won't get that rise that they need before the butter starts melting. And what winds up happening is the butter melts all the way out and you wind up with very thin, kind of compact scones. Whereas if they go into a hot oven where the butter is cold, it puffs up right away from the moisture and from your baking powder, and it'll leave these little flaky little pockets inside of it. That is what you're looking for. Now the third tip, you know that I'm all about whole grain and whole grain flours. I always like to do a blend of whole grain flours and refined flours in my baked goods, and these scones are no different. So what I'm using and what I recommend in this recipe is whole wheat pastry flour. If you have never used it before, it's a really great flour to use for scones, cookies, cakes, things like that. It is a lower protein flour, and what that means is that it's very similar to like a cake flour or all-purpose flour. So I use the whole wheat pastry flour with all-purpose flour in this recipe. I'm going to go ahead and add some links in the description in case you can't find whole wheat pastry flour locally. You can always order it online as well. So let's go ahead and get started, and you are going to be mastering scones in no time and baking them for your family and friends and loved ones, and they will be so impressed with your skills. Okay, so as I mentioned, what you want to do is you want to get everything started. So I've got the oven preheating. You're going to cut up your strawberry into chunks. You can do bigger chunks, but I do find that it kind of gives like a weird watery texture if they're too big. Once the strawberries are cut up, we're going to mix together our dry ingredients. And then once these are all done, we're just going to mix this together really well, set it aside, and we're going to start on the butter. Now I mentioned that the butter has got to stay cold until it hits the hot oven. For this one, I'm simply using a grater, a box grater, and frozen butter. This feels kind of gross, but it gives a really great texture to your scones. So once it's grated, we're going to mix this right into our dry ingredients. Now what I didn't show was I already have all the wet ingredients on the side. They're ready to go too. Mix in your butter. You don't want to over mix this. We want that butter to stay cold, so we're working quickly. And then I'm adding in all of my wet ingredients. That was the eggs. I made sure to mix those together before I add them in. You're going to blend this all together. You don't want to over mix this. You just want to make sure the wet and the dry come together. Then you add in your strawberries. And once the strawberries are in, we're going to start forming the scones. Now you can see this is a little bit of a wet batter, so just use a little more flour than what you might normally. I realized at this point I'd put in too many strawberries, so I had to pull some out. I got excited because the strawberries were so good, so I just added a bunch. Now take this and you're going to divide the dough into half. I mean, you can form the scones however you want. I do triangle scones every time. And you're going to flatten this out with a little bit of flour. I use a bench knife. You can cut it into 4 pieces, 6, 8. You can see I did 8. And then we're going to move these right onto our baking sheet. You can leave these separated or you can bake them together like I did. I do it both ways. I don't know. I just decided to do it together this time. And then you're going to brush it with an egg wash. This isn't necessary, of course. It just gives it a really pretty shine after it's done baking. And then just when you're brushing this, make sure you don't get too much eggs in there. Otherwise you wind up with scrambled eggs on the top. After that, I sprinkle it with sugar. Again, this is optional. Goes right into the oven. And here's our finished scones. Now you can see, you maybe can't see, I don't know. They're very light, they're very flaky, they're very tender. This is exactly what you're looking for. They're loaded with strawberries, they're loaded with that lemon flavor. And you can see here, it just flakes apart. That's what you're looking for. That is a good scone. Now you can eat them just like this, or you can even drizzle it with just a little bit of lemon glaze. And that's it, they are done.